this was not what a lot of people expected. Were the members, I mean, maybe the opposition members, were they surprised, or did you see the handwriting on the wall before now?
No, we are never surprised. You know, external vigilance is the price of liberty. So we are always vigilant when issues like this are to come up. And remember that the process started with the formalities of beginning the sitting. And then in between, there was need for an executive session. And we went into that executive session, during which the speaker explained the reason for the special session, because we are actually on break from plenary and looking into the budget issues. And so we said we needed to have copies of the Electoral Act amendments, clean copies to look at. And he promised that that will be given to us, and we'll have 15 to 20 minutes to look at it. But the first sign of trouble was that as soon as we devolved into executive session, no copy was given to us. And then the deputy speaker, who chairs all consideration of all reports, proceeded to consider the reports in a manner that we considered not judicial to good conscience.
Do you think it was scripted, deliberate?
No, if we are going to read an important national document as repeal and reenactment of the Electoral Act, it's not just mere amendment, then we should look at all the clauses. But it proceeded from clause 1 to 10. So how do I know if something in between, in clause 5, does not sit well with my conscience?
So normally, what you're saying is that each clause, you will mention the clause, read out the content of that clause, response on floor, whether you agree or not, before you go to the next clause.
Procedure. So
okay, but he said he was reading clause 1 to 10.
In 3 minutes, we are at clause 60.
Oh, okay, that's what happened with clause 60.
Yes. In 3 minutes, we are clause 60.
And we could see the lawmakers protesting. I think that, so that was captured. It didn't happen in the executive session because the cameras were there. And they could capture the protest of lawmakers. What's going on? Distinguished, you have to, you know, read it clause by clause. So we heard that protest clause by clause, clause by clause. And it was seen, I don't know how that was resolved, but it was seen that lawmakers, that was not really where their attention was. It was when he now entered clause 60, then they said no, clause 60, clause 60. That was now the protest in that particular area. So how was the matter eventually resolved when these issues about the fact that you didn't have the laws before you, what was being amended, the copies, the clean copies that are supposed to be amended were supposed to be before you, they were not given to you, and then they were not even read out. They were just taken wholesale by just their numbers. How was that eventually resolved?
Well, the chant for clause 60 that you heard and Nigerians heard was the fact that at clause 60 sub 3, we thought that we should make an important amendment. And they didn't want to allow us do that. But eventually, because of that chant, we were allowed to take the amendments. About 2 or 3 members took amendments, which failed, of course, because the APC had the majority voice. But then, what we wanted to push through is something that is very important to the whole process of the electoral amendment bill. Why do I say so? The Senate version added a proviso that where real-time transmission of election results fail, then the manual from EC8A should be depended upon. But we wanted also to say that we are successfully transmitted, the transmitted results should also have the same effect in law as the physical copy. Because the lacuna is, they will now go and use those physical copies to perpetrate whatever shenanigans anybody wants to perpetrate in terms of compromising the process. So we thought that a win-win situation would be that the transmitted copies that had gone should have the force of law, same as is being accorded the physical from ECHA, but they wouldn't allow that.
Because as it is now, even the IREV itself, you can't even rely on that. That's the consequence of this, isn't it? As having the force of law.
Yes, you can't. But the fact is that the word electronically transmitted has gotten into the amendment. It has gotten into the amendment. But it is that lacuna of adding that proviso, you know, from the Senate side that we are against, and saying that even if it were to stand, then let's open the hallway to justice.
You know, yesterday, just a moment, we had Senator Ojo Okalu here, and he is a member. I do not know if that committee is still standing, though. The Harmonization Committee.
It's gone.
Between the House and the Senate.
It's gone.
You mean the Harmonization Committee is gone?
It's gone. Since they were repealed,
yes, indeed. So
they weren't even allowed to function.
Exactly. So that's what I was curious about, because he told us that, oh, by this afternoon we should have a very clear document of what the harmonization, because I would imagine that was the work that these people were meant to do. You know, bring whatever has been harmonized by the House and the Senate to the chambers for them to simply pass. This proviso which you speak of, was it ever sent to the Harmonization Committee?
Well, as far as I know, the Harmonization Committee didn't come up with any report. We have some members in that committee, and they were to push through this clause, this amendment that we tried to push on the floor. They were to take it to the Harmonization Committee. But again, the process is such that when it comes to conference committee to harmonize, by law, you're not supposed to add or subtract. When you get to a particular clause, it is either you take the Senate version or you take the version of the House. But what we saw was a tinkered report, different from the Electoral Act passed by the House of Representatives and different from what the Senate passed.
So it was amended?
It was amended outside of plenary.
That is very strange. What exactly was added to it? What was the amendment that was added? Because you said it's different from what the Senate passed. It's also different from what the House passed.
Okay, let me point you to section 84.3. I have a copy, by the way.
Which one? The amended version?
So we
have 2022.
If you simply look at 84, Clause 84.2 says, the procedure for the nomination of candidates by political parties for the various elective positions shall be by direct, indirect primaries or consensus. 3 modes. What did we get on the floor? They gave us this paper while the consideration was already on. And what did this say? 84.2. The procedure for the nomination of candidates by political parties for the various elective positions shall be by direct primaries or consensus. So indirect was gone.
Wait. So you mean they already took that out before they gave it to all the members on the floor?
In the clean copy that we are to consider, the 3 modes are here.
There. But
and now they brought this appendage. And obviously, this is what was read and passed.
So it shall
denying political parties the right to choose the mode of their primaries, limiting them to direct
and consensus.
Is this not
as against what we passed and what the Senate passed?
Is this not legislative brigandage? I mean, this is not the procedure in the House, is it?
Well, call it whatever name. The jury should be Nigerians. We are minority, and so they have claimed the majority. But ultimately, we work for the Nigerian people. So the matter is out there for the Nigerian people to dissect.
Yesterday, we saw the minority walkout of the proceedings when they were not getting their way. We've seen in times past that form of protest usually is not a very effective form of protest because, I mean, from what we saw, not all members of the opposition got up. So they appointed another minority leader there, and they went ahead and they passed what they had to pass. How effective would you say that the form of protest you choose, is in terms of getting the voice of the... Because I would imagine that also within the APC, there are those who also share your sentiments. But the fact that you decide to walk out, removes the wind from their sail.
No, on the contrary. Yes, some people have said a walkout is not a very good democratic practice. But you also ask yourself, we are close to primary session, and no member of the APC would want to be caught on camera going against his or her party's position. You saw that they were all hooded in one part of the chambers, even standing largely, And so there was no way they were going to support these very democratic moves, even though some of them, their hearts of hearts, stand with us. So there was nothing we could do seated there. We don't want to be part of what might constitute an illegality. And so we decided to register our protest before the Nigerian people, to let them know that the APC has stolen the village drum. We'll wait for them to beat it come 2027.
Why do you say that they've stolen? Because, I mean, normally people know that at the end of the day, what I first of all find interesting is that the House, it would seem, already stood apart when it passed the Electoral Act. The version it passed, a lot of people saluted the effort of the House of Representatives because its own was pretty straightforward. There was no proviso. It made provisions for e-transmission. What do you think has transpired that has now made, it will seem, members of the House now toe the line of the Senate?
Well, it's party politics. You said it. The country applauded the House of Representatives for the futuristic stance it took in terms of transmission. And then between the few days of harmonization, party politics came into play and sought to water down the very far-reaching decision that the House of Representatives had progressively taken.
So they just basically whipped their party members in line and said, this is what the party wants. What the party wants is what you would do, which appears clearly that was what was done in both chambers.
It happened in open chambers, and we saw that the vote was along party lines.
So this comes across as though they are just telling the people, we are in the majority. We're confident that we will go out there and get what we want. And that raises questions for opposition. Are they going to see this as a tool to galvanize themselves and ensure that, look, Nigerians clearly want something done, which the opposition is not doing at the moment? Are we going to see opposition tomorrow equally just capitulate, as we've seen several governors have now moved to the APC?
Well, what the APC had done to the psyche of Nigerians is not something I will begin to recount here. If you recall, talking about elections and the fidelity to due process in elections, the late Musa Yar'Adua, former president of this country, is mostly revered for just one sentence, that the elections that brought him into power was flawed. And so he was going to do something towards making our elections more transparent. And then he set up the late Justice Uwais Commission to look into that. Now, have you ever heard this government say anything about the glitch of 2023? So it remains a sore thumb. When you bury a corpse solely, a hand or leg will stick out. So that glitch is sticking out.
It's sticking out, but I'm wondering, because when you talk about government, yes, the executive arm of government hasn't said anything, and I think whenever it is that people get the opportunity, questions need to be asked of the president, the vice president, and other members of the executive arm of government. But members of the legislature cannot also escape that question as well as to what they've done to hold INEC accountable. What exactly was the glitch? Because we heard this over and over again, and it doesn't seem that we have been able to get any real level of accountability from INEC, either from the oversight that the National Assembly is supposed to do, or maybe some investigation by the executive arm of government.
Well, it's not as if we've been sleeping on our earth. I was introduced as leader of the Labour Party caucus. And I know that early in the day, in 2023, few weeks and months after we came in, we decided that that issue of glitch had to be looked into. And so one of our members, Honorable Benedict Etanabene from Delta State, was mandated by the caucus to move an investigation of INEC and the glitch. But the speaker at the time said the cases were still in court, which made sense anyway, because the courts were going to rule one way or the other concerning the glitch. But long after the court processes, that matter has never been listed. And so neither the House of Representatives nor the National Assembly has talked about it. But we have utilized forums to talk about it. And the APC has not felt any compulsion or shame to address the issue of that glitch. So it remains there in living memory.
Did the minority caucus both across both chambers, did they raise this matter when INEC came for their budget defense?
Well, I do not belong to the Committee on Electoral Matters, that's INEC, so I wouldn't know if
couldn't they have also...
But I'm sure it would have been raised at one point or the other.
Yeah, but couldn't it have been, at least, if not consistently, time and again, raised on the floor of either Senate or the House by other party members?
No, you know that INEC on its own has whimsically explained the glitch to say, well, it was just an occurrence. But a real investigative hearing was bound to unearth certain things, because an investigative hearing will have the power and audacity to summon even individuals connected to that occurrence.
What is your concern about this amendment, the way it stands now?
Well, two concerns. Section 60, that we spoke about, that the Senate added a proviso. And don't forget, our problem with that, some people are saying that internet availability in some places. Mike Igini, former INEC resident electoral commissioner, is on record as having said that prior to 2023 elections, INEC and the Nigerian Communications Commission did conduct a survey and that showed that 97% of the electoral areas had 2 or 3G network coverage. Secondly, after the 2023 elections, who has ever complained that beavers didn't work in his or her area? Not one person. And I challenge anybody to still come out and tell Nigerians. So I feel a little bit of shame if able-bodied men will come out before the public to say there is no internet in my village. Then what are you doing to bring internet to your village? And nobody has ever complained that beavers didn't work in 2023. So going forward, 4 years down the line, we are still going back to that line. And these beavers is like our phone, like several people have explained. You send a message, there is no network, you enter a network coverage area, it delivers.
Yeah, which is part of what we told.
And shows the time that the message was even sent.
Because, I mean, it just clearly suggests that there's some sort of mischief here, because it's not really about so-called network.
I'm a politician. Let me tell you the lacuna they're creating.
Go ahead, please.
Now they can, you know that the whole process of ad hoc staff is controlled by INEC.
Yeah.
With some politicians playing active roles, giving them lists, and they accept this list. And because they are controlled by INEC, they can get some of these ad hoc staffers that are not pensionable or permanent staffers of INEC, not to upload on the excuse that there is no network coverage, and then revert to from EC8A. I hear the majority APC say that, well, you have your copy. How many copies can you tender in court? What is the time frame for the court to examine? We saw mutilations in 2023. Did the courts have enough time to sift through each one? When you are given maybe 2 days to present all your evidence. So I think that they are just setting the stage for a grand larceny of the electoral process.
Because even as at the time the first part was amended, where they put the lacuna, or the proviso, we were thinking, when we were asking them, look, if you're saying, yeah, where the network fails, you rely on from EC8A, who determines when the network even fails? What's the threshold? Because the thing was, as we've seen previous days, what they do is, they just tell you, there's no network in this area. And then they just do whatever they want. And so clearly, this raises more concerns that this was the intendment of those lawmakers who didn't even want the electronic transmission of results in the first
place. Yeah.
You know, I refuse to give up hope. Because, yeah, so some people will say, look, from what we are seeing now, it does appear that, you know, all is been passed, it's been done, there's nothing we can do. Because on the face of it, if one were to just look at it face value, what the Senate was trying to pass, some people will say, come on, guys, we all know that this is our country, it's developing, there can still be network issues, etc., etc. And maybe what the Senate was trying to do was just make a provision, just in case. But our experience, unfortunately, tells us otherwise. We know that in the place where provisions are made, for instance, when in 2015, when there was the card reader, an incident form, the incident form in many places was far much more than the people whose card the card reader could read. And so the distrust that a lot of Nigerians have for this proviso stems from experience. They've seen something. But they also know that INEC has powers. INEC's, how do I put it now, the rules and regulations in terms of how the process should go is still very sacrosanct. I'm reading right now that INEC is saying that this weekend, the elections that are happening in the FCT, the results must be transmitted from the polling units. And I think that's what they're going to rely upon. Is there any way that pressure can be applied to INEC in terms of what its own rules are, what the rules and regulations are, to make sure that the places where this network is not available are minimal? That what is actually on the EC8A, I beg your pardon, is the same thing that it is on the Beavers machine, and that there should be no difference between what somebody eventually brings, because I want to imagine that in the process, yes, the thing did not go, but the picture was taken nonetheless. It does not stop anyone from taking a picture of what the results sheet says. So I want to imagine that there must still be a process where that picture can be taken, and that is what will eventually be relied upon should there be a dispute between what is on the EC8A and what is on the Beavers machine. Is that impossible to ask for? Is it too much to hope for?
No, my friend, and that is why we are having this discourse, because the power resides ultimately in the people. And when the people move, you recall that it took the protests at the National Assembly to even get the National Assembly to expedite and finalize work on this process. We all knew that the elections were coming. Now, the INEC has regulations, but all we are seeking is for this to enter into the laws. Remember, the Supreme Court kept the INEC regulations by the side because INEC talked about electronic transmission through the same beavers. But it wasn't accepted because it wasn't written into the law. And that's why we want that word electronically transmitted to be written in, which we have achieved. But it's like giving with one hand and taking with the other. So they still took away that foolproof mechanism by introducing the proviso of where it fails. And I've challenged anybody to prove that it failed in 2023.